Hello, my name is Alex Tagawa, and you are about to hear my story about how I survived the massacre in Congo, simply because I am a Tutsi. Congolese Tutsis, we are discriminated simply because of the way we look. So, growing up, they used to tell me that you are not Congolese. Congolese people don't have a nose like yours. Congolese people don't have a face like yours. Because for them, being a Congolese is having a flat nose and a flat face. So having a long face and pointy nose is automatically a stranger who is treated like, inhumane. So we're not viewed as human in Congo. So you're about to hear my story from 1996. I was a little kid. So, but what happened then is worse now, 2020, as we are speaking. So simply because we are Tutsi. I hope you like my story.
The conflict between the Bem people and the Banyamulenge people. Ntagawa Alex's story. My name is Ntagawa Alex. I was born in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, in the province of Bukavu. I am a member of a minority tribe called Tutsi. The Tutsis live in Rwanda, Burundi and Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Physically, Tutsi look a little different from other tribes. They are skinny and tall with Europeans-like physical features. Because of looking a little different from other tribes, we are often the victims in the whole region of the African Great Lakes region. For example, during the 1994 Rwandan genocide, about 1 million Tutsis were massacred by their neighbor Hutus. The Rwandan genocide was stopped by the Tutsi rebels who invaded the country from refugee camps in Uganda. After the Tutsis taking over Rwanda, the Rwandan Hutus who did the killings ran away to Eastern DRC, my country. At this time, Eastern DRC was already unstable. The region has been experiencing tribal conflicts of its own. We as the Congolese Tutsis have been dealing with other Congolese Bantu tribes similar to the Hutus who often attack our villages, kill our people and take our cattle for food. Now that the Hutus who killed our fellow Tutsis in Rwanda are in DRC, we knew our safety was in the worst danger. By 1996, DRC started experiencing its worst war in the country's history. The war was all over the country, not just the eastern part. However, I am going to tell you just what happened in my villages. It was Wednesday, during summertime, I cannot remember the month, when soldiers from a tribe called Bemba attacked my village and other Tutsi villages. I call them soldiers instead of calling them rebels because they were in the Congolese government army. Basically, we were attacked by the government soldiers but from an enemy tribe that always fight our people. My people are also called the Banyamulenge, meaning people of Mulenge, to differentiate ourselves from Tutsis in neighboring countries. Mulenge is the place we live in. So, the Bem people have been fighting against the Banyamulenge, my people, for a long time. Back to the subject. So on that Wednesday when soldiers from Bem people attacked our village, people in my village were in church. It was our traditions for the whole village to go to church all day on Wednesdays and of course on Sundays. So, when soldiers from Bem tribe attacked our village, all the villagers were in the church. The village was empty, so the soldiers had to come to the church, which was little further from the village. By the time the soldiers arrived at the church, they had surrounded the church so that no one gets to escape. Then, other soldiers stood by the church doors and windows with their big guns. At this time, the church services had already stopped, and everyone is very scared. As a kid, I was hiding under the church desk where people were sitting to avoid being shot at. Then, soldiers asked all men to get outside of the church. Luckily, my father was not in the village at this time. He had traveled with cattle to a distant land for grassing for the whole summer. However, one of my older brothers was in the church, and he sang in a choir, but he managed to grab women's clothes so that he can stay in church with women. He assumed the men were going to be taken outside to be killed, and he was right. By the time most men were taken outside, they tied their hands, and they started shooting at some of them. At that time, it was also getting dark. The soldiers decided to let all the women go back to their villages and spend the nights in their homes. The men who were not killed remained with the soldiers. The whole village was surrounded. Even though they allowed the women to spend the night in their homes, there was no way to escape. Next morning, Thursday, they got all the people from their homes, and they took us to their villages, which took us all day walk. Their villages were very far. I was a little kid, I couldn't walk all day, so one of the men from our tribe carried me on his shoulders. By the evening we arrived at a village of Bem people called Weba. The soldiers put us into 3 different buildings where we spent the night. Next morning, Friday, the chief of the village came to visit us. He was also a member of Bem people, but he was very kind. He brought us food, and he told us that he is sorry about what his people are doing. He also brought our moms water to bath children. By the time our moms were giving us a bath, he had come back and told our moms to dress all the boys like girls because the soldiers were coming to kill the boys. So, my brother and I were along with boys from other families were dressed in girls' dresses. The soldiers came to identify the boys, but they couldn't recognize us. By night, Friday night, we heard people screaming from one of the buildings where our people were kept. They were being killed. People in the buildings where my family was started repenting, praying and singing worship songs. By the next morning, Saturday morning, we heard from the survivors from the building that was attacked that 44 people, men, women, and children, were killed at night, and most of them were children. Next, the chief of the Bem people was very angry to see people being killed in his village. The chief told the soldiers that enough is enough, and he does not want to see bloodshed in his village anymore. With the chiefs of the village's order, the soldiers decided to get our people out of his village. They took us to a big river, and they took us in a boat to another Bem village called Maboko. After arriving at Maboko, the soldiers left by the river with guards and they went to get Interahamwe Solders. Interahamwe are Rwandans Hutus who committed genocide in Rwanda but ran away to Congo after losing the war in Rwanda against the Tutsis. The Bem people were working with the Hutus from Rwanda because the tribes are similar. They are all members of Bantu tribes, whereas Tutsis are members of Hamites tribes such as people in the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. In other words, the Bem people in Congo and the Hutus of Rwanda are ethnically similar even though they speak different dialects. Back to the subject, so the Bem people left us by the river, and they went to get the Interahamwe Hutu soldiers so that they can kill us since they had more experience in killing than Bem people. After Interahamwe Hutu soldiers arrived by the river where my people were, they started killing men and boys. This is the worst scene I remember seeing as a child. Seeing men from my tribe screaming aloud while being killed, seeing blood running on a ground like a river, seeing a human with machetes who looked like they are possessed with the demons in ways that they were chopping other humans being into pieces, seeing the very people I know including the man who carried me on his shoulders while we left our village being killed. It was a bad situation to watch, and yet I did not see the whole killings because my mom was covering my face with her clothes. At that time by the river, the Interahamwe Hutu soldiers killed 46 men and older boys from my people. Then after the killings, the rest of women and young children of my people were taken to a camp of Bem Solders which was still in a place called Maboko. At the soldiers' camps, I don't know exactly what happened. This past summer of 2017 I went back to Africa, and my mom retold me the story, but she did not clarify what happened at the soldiers' camps. I assume that our moms were raped by the soldiers, but this topic is taboo in our culture to discuss. So, we spent the night at the Bem soldiers' camp and the next morning we were taken by a boat to one of the main city in the area called Uvira. My people who were taken to Uvira at this time were numbered 202, women and children only. In Uvira city, we stayed by the port of Lake Tanganyika for 2 days. The soldiers went to ask their leaders and the leaders of the city of Uvira what to do with us. At this time, a total of 700 people from my tribe had already been killed, and most of them were killed in our villages before rebels taking us. While still at the port of Lake Tanganyika, white people showed up. They brought us food and medicines. I do not know where these white people came from and who they worked for. All I know is that they brought us cookies and medicine. Soon after that, the soldiers came back, and they decided to take us to the plains of the Rusizi River by the border with Rwanda. After arriving by the border, we spent a night in a building with frozen human blood. We knew it was another group of our people that were killed there. However, the building was too small. Some of our people spent the night outside. By the other side of the border, Rwandan side, the Rwandan Tutsi soldiers were observing what was going on with our people. The Rwandan Tutsi soldiers were able to cross the border and fight the BEM soldiers to save us, but they were afraid risking our lives as were. However, the Tutsi soldiers stayed by the border observing, and they made sure that the BEM soldiers were aware of their presence. Lucky, the BEM soldiers decided to let our people cross the border to Rwanda. They were taken to a refugee camp in Rwanda. My family stayed in the refugee camp for 2 years, and at this time she had 4 children, including me and other 3 orphans whose father was the man who carried me when we were leaving our village, heading to the soldiers' villages. After these 2 years in the refugee camp, we heard that my father is still alive. The whole time we thought he was killed wherever he was with the cattle, but he had survived. My father came to get us from the refugee camp, and we went back to Congo. Going back in the story, within a month after my people or the Banyamulenge people were killed by the BEM soldiers, the soldiers from my tribe were angry, and they attacked a BEM village in a place called Makobola, and they killed everyone in the village including women and children. My mom and siblings went to Congo to live with our father and other relatives, even though it was still not safe. The 3 other orphans my mom was taking care of were taken by their relative. In Congo, we kept living in violence. BEM people would attack our villages regularly, especially summertime, and they would burn our villages and take our cows. Every time they attack, my people would go to hide in the bushes. By the time the BEM people had burned the villages, took the cows, and left our villages, we would come back to our villages and start rebuilding our villages. One of my grandma's village was burned by the BEM people, and the missionary from David Livingstone Foundation came to our villages, and they rebuilt my grandmother's village with very beautiful houses. David Livingstone was a famous European missionary to Africa, and he was also anti-slavery. He tried to stop the slave trade in Africa in 1800s. Due to the ongoing conflicts between BEM tribe and the Banyamulenge tribe, my people, my older brother along with his family, wife and children, my younger sister and I decided to leave DRC, and we went to a refugee camp in Tanzania. We became refugees in Tanzania in 2005. My parents and my other siblings stayed in our village. I guess they did not want to leave our cattle and land. In Tanzania, we first lived in a small refugee camp called Mukugwa Refugee Camp. Mukugwa Camp had people from different countries. There were refugees from Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Sudan, Uganda, and Madagascar. We lived in Mukugwa Refugee Camp for 2 years. Then the United Nations closed the camp. Refugees were given choices to choose to go to different refugee camps, and people from my tribe chose to go to one of the biggest Congolese refugee camps in Tanzania called Nairogusu. Nairogusu camp had more than 50,000 refugees from BEM tribe, and they were in the camp because they ran away from my tribe in DRC. We chose to go to the Congolese refugee camp because the other camps had Hutu refugees from Burundi and Rwanda, and we feared them more than we feared the BEM people because they had guns in refugee camps and they hated Tutsis very much. So, after closing Mukugwa refugee camp, my people were taken to the Nairogusu refugee camp. By the time we arrived in Nairogusu, the BEM people already knew we were coming to live with them. They were very angry, and they came to attack the UN vehicles that had us. They threw rocks on our people and they told the United Nations that they could not live with the Banyamulenge people because the Banyamulenge people, my people, are not refugees but soldiers who come to kill them. However, the UN and the government of Tanzania knew the allegations were wrong. It was obvious that my people were refugees because we had women, babies, and children. The UN told the Bem refugees that they must live with my people, and whoever refuses to live with the Banyamulenge, my people, must sign up for the deportation so they can take them back to Congo. Surprisingly, thousands of Bem people did sign up for the deportation, and they were deported. And my people stayed in the camp and lived with the Bem people for 2 years. In the camp, the Bem people would cuss on our people publicly to harass them, but they never killed anyone while we were there. After living in Nairogusu refugee camp with Bem people, my tribe was taken to another refugee camp called Kanemu American Village. The American Village was not a permanent refugee camp but a transit for refugees coming to America. The refugees at the American Village were very happy, and they looked very healthy. Some of them gained weight, in good ways cause refugees in other camps were very underweight. Refugees in American Village were healthier not because they were eating better food than refugees from other camp but because of the positive thoughts in their minds. They knew they were going to America. They talked about America 24/7. My people spent 6 months in American Village doing interviews with U.S. immigration. Then we were brought to different states here in the U.S. Finally, my family was taken to San Antonio, Texas. I was about 17 years old during this period. I do not know exactly when I was born. And this was in 2010. I did not speak any English and school was very hard, but I managed to stay in high school for 4 years, graduated from high school, and I went to college. In college, I studied social work at Lubbock Christian University in West Texas. I chose to study social work because I always wanted to help people just like the humanitarian workers who used to bring us food in refugee camps. During my last semester at Lubbock Christian University, I had a chance to have an internship at a local hospital called University Medical Center, UMC, where I worked with the Department of Social Services. The hospital was so huge, and it was scary at first seeing patients with tubes in their bodies. The medical terminology was also difficult, and I started experiencing some culture shocks, which reminded me of how I felt when I first come to America, with no English. However, I got used to the hospital via the training I received from the social workers at the hospital. After being trained, I started helping social workers by doing some of the work they do in assisting the patients. Surprisingly, the hospital received a patient from a Bem tribe. The very same tribe is an enemy to my people. The Bem patient did not speak English well, but he spoke Swahili, a language that I also speak. So, one of the social workers who oversaw assisting this patient from Bem tribe asked me if I could go to translate for the patients. I went to talk to the patient, and I found out that he was from a Bem tribe, and he lived in the Nairogusu refugee camp. The patient and I lived in the same refugee camp at the same time. Of course, we did not know each other because the camp was so huge. Additionally, while living at the Nairogusu refugee camp, my people did not interact with Bem people because we are enemies. Back to the subject, so I translated for the patient, and I enjoyed helping him even though he came from an enemy tribe because that is what I was trained for by the social workers at the hospital and social work professors at Lubbock Christian University. I learned that National Association of Social Work Code of Ethics 4.02 that social workers should not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, marital status, political belief, religion, immigration status, or mental or physical ability. Additionally, I also love people. I knew I had to help this patient from my enemy tribe even more than how I could help a member of my tribe because he needed to see positive things about my people. So, I translated for the patient, and I made sure he had everything he needed. A couple days later, the patient's wife and their baby daughter came from New Mexico to visit their patient. They also wanted to stay close to the patient. However, there was no place for the patient's wife and their baby daughter to stay, and there is no Bem community in Lubbock, or even other Congolese tribes other than my tribe, the enemy tribe to the Bem people. So, I told the patient and his wife that if they give me consent, I will try to find a Congolese family that they can stay with here in Lubbock so that they can be close to their patients. They gave me consent, and I made phone calls to the people of my tribe who lives here in town, and I asked them if they can give the patient's wife and a baby a place to stay for a couple of weeks. The patient was very sick from a car accident, that's why he had to stay in a hospital for 2 weeks. The patient's wife and the baby were taken to one of the homes of my tribal member who agreed to take them, and they were very nice to patient's family. They brought the patient's food every day at noon, along with the patient's wife, and they made sure the patient and his family had everything they needed, including buying a car seat for the baby. The patients were amazed by the kindness of my people, and I showed him, and he told me that, "Thank you so much for all the work you are doing for my family and me. Only God knows how he can pay you. As for me, I do not have anything to pay you. And if I will ever hear people talking bad about your tribe, I will defend your people." I told the patient I would defend his people as well. After all, we are all human beings. There is no point of killing one another. After receiving the intensive care at the hospital for the 2 weeks, the patient was able to go back to New Mexico. The patient remained in touch with the family that gave him a place to stay, and both families had developed a good friendship. The end.